Welcome to Flight Talk. Today, retired Air Force Lieutenant Colonels Dave and Jeff will share with us how navigation in the winter calls for extra cautionary steps to ensure the safety of the planes and the passengers. Jeff's background is as a T-37 instructor pilot. He flew T-38s for 4 years with varied background in KC-135. He was a safety officer for many years and served as the Chief of Flight Safety for the Pacific Air Forces. Jeff has also done 30 years of Class A mishap investigations for the Air Force. He was also an aircraft accident investigation instructor and taught over 500 students from the U.S. and 60 allied nations. He is currently the safety advisor in the Air National Guard. Dave entered the Air Force in 1971 and graduated from pilot training in 1972. He flew the T-29 Convair for 3 years, then graduated to the C-123K Provider, which he flew for 4 years. He then flew the C-130E Hercules for 4 years. For the next 17 years, he flew the C-5 Galaxy. Dave was the Chief of Wing Safety for over 7 years at Westover Air Reserve Base, Massachusetts, until his retirement from the Air Force. He then served as an aviation safety advisor to the Air Force Reserve Command for 11 years and is now in his 6th year as an aviation safety advisor to the Air National Guard. Dave will first share his experience and the importance of making sure the plane is in good conditions before taking off.
With the winter approaching here, from a seasonal standpoint, every season I think is a little different up here in the Northeast. But I remember a cold day in 1974 back at the Syracuse International Airport where I used to fly. I was a brand new aircraft commander, and they were going to sort of give me the keys to the airplane. Which had a whole bunch of passengers on board, and I just turned 20. I was 26 years old at the time. And I worked for an elderly, or at least it seemed to me, an elderly lieutenant colonel who worked in the office with me, and I was looking forward to the flight. My co-pilot that day was going to be an ROTC, a Reserve Officer Training Corps instructor from Cornell University, and I was really looking forward to it because it was a beautiful day and I looked forward to flying. Pilots are like that. When I got there, he was a fast-talking Texan, the old man. I'm going to refer to him as the old man now. He says, "Get out of here as fast as you can. You have classified material on board. Get out of here as fast as you can. You have classified material on board." He didn't even say, I don't remember him saying good morning to me. He just wanted me out of there. So we still had to do a flight plan. We still had to study the route. And so I was anxious to take off as soon as I could. So I studied the route and filed the flight plan along with my co-pilot there. And when we got to the airplane, they drove us out to the airplane, and there was a lot of ice covering the airplane, and the aircraft maintenance people were using big space heaters to clear the ice off the wings, which is not, they almost never do that. That's to just make the air inside warm for people so they can be comfortable. Usually anybody who's been in an airliner knows that they use this ethyl glycol type fluid that is sprayed onto the airplane to get the ice off the airplane. An airplane should not be flown with ice on it. And the airplane had quite a bit of ice on it. And I couldn't get out of my head the instruction to get out of there as fast as I could. So we got on the airplane, and maintenance people all started to pack up their equipment and leave. And I turned to the flight engineer, and I said, "Hey, where's everybody going?" He said, "Well, they saw me get on the airplane, and they figured their job was all done." I said, "Wow, not so done. There's ice all over my wing, And the co-pilot was over in the right seat where the co-pilot usually sits. He said, "My wing's got a whole bunch of ice on it, too." So they went and got out their space heaters and started to use them again, and I was still anxious to get out of there as fast as I could, because he outranked me quite a bit, and he was like that. He was used to barking out orders like that. So the co-pilot said, "Hey, my wing's looking a little better," and after a while I said, "Hey, my wing's looking a little better." We never did look at the tail, which is, of course, we should have looked at. And when my wings got a little bit clearer, I told him, "Yeah, I guess that looks okay to me." And the co-pilot said, "Yeah, I guess that looks okay to me." We started the engines, and we taxied out, and we took off into perfectly clear air, and we raised the landing gear, and then we raised the flaps, and then I picked up a normal climb speed of what they an airplane usually has or most airplanes I flew has a recommended speed to climb at which to fly the airplane in a climb, and it was 140 knots, which is a little more than 140 miles an hour. So folks that don't know that, we nautical miles per hour. And when I picked up that normal climb speed, the airplane shook violently, even though the other two folks, the flight engineer and the co-pilot, they may not have realized why the airplane shook, but I sure did. It was approaching what they call an aerodynamic stall. The ice on the airplane was disturbing the airflow, and it was no longer developing the lift that it normally would develop at the normal climb speed. I increased the climb speed to 150 knots, and it kind of smoothed right out, but the other two folks said, well, I think we should bring the airplane back home again and have them look at it. There's something seriously wrong with it. And so I sort of agreed with that, and we came in and landed at a faster than normal airspeed, which I guess was the right thing to do, because we landed uneventfully. But when we taxied into the tarmac there, the whole world was out there waiting for me, including the old man. And other folks were there too. And when we taxied in and we shut the engines down and got out of the airplane, we walked all around it, and they walked all around it, and the fuselage was covered with ice, and there was ice all over the tail. Never should have taken off like that, but we did. Next thing you know, I'm back into the flight planning room, and the old man sort of comes over to me and puts his hand on my shoulder and said, hey, I did a pretty good job bringing it back in and all that. And no longer was he telling me to get out of there as fast as I could. Now he's telling me to take all the time I need to make sure the airplane's completely cleaned off before we take off. It's a good example of how this rank intimidation, I guess it's called. Actually, it is called. It's a rank or position intimidation. It's a factor. It could be a factor in a mishap. We could have lost the airplane and could have killed everybody. And he knew that then. That's when the formal or informal authority gradient is too steep. In this case, it was too steep, and for me, and I never was going to let that happen again. I should have just transmitted from the airplane that, hey, the airplane's covered with ice. We're not going to be able to get out of here as fast as we can. I was surprised to see how nice he was to me because he knew what almost could have happened. That's a story there. It's a learning experience there.
Jeff will now share his experience flying in the winter, specifically the importance of double-checking and the danger of assuming an airplane is clean.
Dave, yeah, I was stationed at Fairchild, which is in Spokane, Washington. And it's funny, people would say, oh, you're from Washington State, and they'd always assume it rains. But no, Spokane is on the eastern side of the state, and we didn't get the rain, we got the snow. And, a lot of times you'd get the snow on top of the wing with the ice underneath it. As a young aircraft commander, I didn't really consider myself to be too smart on de-icing procedures. But I knew by looking at a wing whether we had to de-ice or not. And we were getting ready for a flight one day, and we had ice on top of the wings, and I'm looking at the overwing hatch, and I can see the ice. So I called maintenance and asked them to come over and de-ice the airplane. The de-icing truck came over. It laid down some de-icing fluid on the left wing, and then it went around to the right wing and laid de-icing fluid down on that, and then drove off. And in my mind, again, I'm not that familiar with de-icing, but in my mind, it didn't seem like that was probably an adequate amount of time to de-ice the airplane. So I went and I looked out the overwing hatches, and I noticed that all they had done was blown de-icing fluid into the middle of the wing on each side and then drove off.
Yeah.
So I sat there and I thought about that, and I thought, well, again, I'm not really that familiar with this procedure, but I know that wing isn't clean. And, we talk about the clean airplane concept when it comes to having no ice or snow on the plane. So I asked maintenance to come back, and I turned to the co-pilot, and now before this, I was used to flying out of Beale Air Force Base in California, where we never de-iced. So as a co-pilot, I didn't really grow up de-icing airplanes. And then I went to Williams Air Force Base in Arizona and flew T-37s, where needless to say, it never snowed and we never had to de-ice the tweets. So then I go to Fairchild, and I'm in the left seat. So I turn to my co-pilot, and I go, hey, get the dash one out. Let's look up how to de-ice this airplane, because if you look in your dash one, you're going to find procedures for how to de-ice the airplane. Put the horizontal stabilizer, full leading edge up, those type of things. And it's all dependent on the type of airplane. But it's in there, and we really should be familiar with it. So I asked them to come back. They de-iced the airplane correctly this time, drove off. I looked out the overwing hatch. The wings were clean. We had done everything we were supposed to do with the horizontal stabilizer, and I knew they'd been back there because I couldn't see them for a while. And I made the assumption at that point that the airplane was clean. And we were lucky because it was clean. But the lesson I learned in this, especially by looking at the overwing hatch and seeing that the wing just had a clean spot in the middle of it, was don't assume that your airplane's been cleaned correctly. Get out, look out any windows that you might have. Have somebody get up in a cherry picker if they have to, and look at the horizontal stabilizer. But one of the keys in this, and I started to educate myself after this, and I found out about holdover times with de-icing fluids. And there is no universal holdover time, because it depends on the type de-icing fluid that you're using. It depends on the outside air temperature. It depends on what's contaminating your wings. So I started to get smart on holdover times. And, there were a couple other things that jumped out at me as I started to educate myself. And I think the one that really struck me the hardest, and this is something that I didn't realize, was that a thickness of frost or ice on the wings no thicker than a credit card can increase the stall speed